Welcome back to another episode of the Stuck in My Room podcast. Today I have guest Tobi Morelli of Archspire. How's it going?
It's going well, man. Yeah, as good as it can be. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How's your quarantine been so far?
It's been, making the best of it. It's doesn't really feel like being on quarantine. I just normally sit at home and play guitar and don't go out much anyways. So it's almost like a normal normal day.
Yeah, I've been keeping pretty busy, luckily, with creative things that I wouldn't necessarily have time to do with going to work. This podcast has taken up a lot of time. I've been rewatching a lot of old horror movies.
Oh, great.
I'm sure you'd be doing the same.
Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely digging through some classics. So they're nice and comforting, and you know what you're getting yourself into. And then trying to find new ones, too, as well. Always on the hunt for new horror movies, because, what else is there to watch?
Do you have a Shudder account?
I sure do, yes.
Do you watch the Joe Bob Briggs specials every Friday?
Sometimes. A lot of the movies I've seen anyways, but that guy's pretty entertaining. It's like watching the some of the old Elvira's, They're both pretty two cool, iconic characters and stuff. So, yeah, Shudder's awesome. It's found so much rad stuff there, and then tons of classics, and then lots of movies that, I've always known of but never, maybe checked out before just because of, availability and stuff like that, so...
Nice. Are you a Trauma fan?
Yeah, Toxic Avenger's sick.
Fair enough.
Romeo and Juliet, Yeah, they're their own beast, and they're pretty rad and funny, and Lloyd Kaufman's, pretty genius guy.
Cool. Yeah, he's going to be on Joe Bob tomorrow, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, sick.
I believe they're going to show Trauma's War.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, I might have to check that out then. Yeah, that dude's rad. I met him once at a convention. Yeah, it was at the Calgary HorrorCon. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe 3 years ago. That was pretty sweet. Yeah, that dude's hilarious. He was because I was there with my fiance, and she's French, and he heard her accent, so then he started speaking French to her, and he's totally fluent, and he was straight up making jokes and stuff with her, and then he's like, hey, what are you doing with this guy and stuff, blah blah, and totally hitting on her in a friendly, joking manner, but it was pretty funny. I'm yeah, it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome. All right, so let's just dive into the questions then.
Yeah, man.
Cool. What was your introduction to music? Did you grow up in a musical home?
Yeah, sort of. My folks, they never really played themselves, but they'd always have music on in the house. So they are always playing vinyls all the time. So I heard, I got exposed to a lot of music in my youth. Everything from Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, even stuff like Chick Corea, some crazy jazz stuff, Mahavishnu Orchestra, to Phantom of the Opera, score and all kinds of stuff. So definitely a household of music. And my grandmother actually was apparently a pretty accomplished piano player. And I have two older sisters, she got them into playing music. So one ended up playing a flute, one played actual classical guitar. So yeah, there's always music in the house. And even for both my mom and my dad, never actually formally playing any music, but always playing music in the house all the time. So it's ingrained in my, in my DNA.
Nice. And what made you pick up the guitar? Was there a musician that inspired you?
I'd say Metallica was one of those bands that I heard when I was really, really young, and I always thought it was really cool that, James Hetfield and Kurt Hammett playing guitar, and I remember seeing music videos with Guns N' Roses and seeing Slash and thinking he was pretty rad, and just the concept of being in a band was really cool. Granted, I was 8 years old, I was pretty young, and me and my best friend that I grew up with pretty much my whole life, we went through the whole early metal phase at a very young age. We were listening to Metallica and Anthrax and all kinds of stuff pretty young, just because our siblings were listening to that stuff, and we were just a sponge to anything that sounded crazy and aggressive, So just being in that kind of environment, and then seeing tons of music videos and stuff like that, and just no one in particular. I think just the just the whole atmosphere of like metal and hard rock and stuff like that, and seeing it on TV just looks so appealing. It was kind of like, I want to try that one day, and eventually just getting to play guitar. My sister, actually, my oldest sister, had she stopped playing guitar, and there was one lying around the house, and I just picked it up and started playing around with it. And my best friend that I mentioned earlier, he also had his like siblings played a lot of instruments, and they had guitars in the house all the time. So we both kind of started playing and messing around together at the same time, and kind of just went from there.
So you play in a band called Archspire. How did that project come about, and how'd you guys meet?
We all met in a back alley. I just.
That's a very Ollie answer.
Yeah. A lot of it. Well, basically the band started with Spencer started the band initially, and he was originally living in Victoria, and he moved to Vancouver he was doing a school for like audio engineering stuff. He was taking like some courses and doing like sound design and stuff, and he wanted to just try a different area and find new musicians to play with. And I already knew him just from the kind of local metal scene, and I'd hung out with him a bunch. We already kind of were buddies and stuff, and we jammed here and there a little bit just for fun, but nothing ever came of it. And I had some other bands it kind of that I was focused on. So I kind of saw him go through like all these kind of member changes for a few years. He was going through like so many different guitar players and vocalists and stuff like that. And our original bass player, Jaron, actually moved to Vancouver around the same time. So then basically they just started jamming and wanted to form, a tech death band. And I told him like, hey man, I'd be stoked to jam with you at some point, but I'm a bit busy. But if my schedule ever clears up and you need a guitar player, I will gladly be around to, fill in. So what happened was, Spencer and Jaron were basically, writing music and trying to look for members at the same time. And they were putting out like Craigslist ads and stuff and trying to get musicians that way. And eventually they got, Dean responded. So he came in and started jamming with them. And that, worked out well. So they started jamming for, I think about maybe 6 months. And then, so about 6 months they were playing together. And then after that, the bands I was in kind of just fell through, and I asked Spencer, I'm like, hey man, do you still need a second guitar player? Because I'm totally available. And he's like, yeah man, we're still looking, so that would be great. So I, lucked out that way. And then I started jamming with, everybody. And then Ollie joined a little bit later. It was maybe 3 months later or 2 months later after I joined. And this is just before we formed, like around 2009. So 2009 was when we were like officially a band.
Nice. And you probably get this question a lot, but what does Archspire mean?
It literally means nothing.
It just sounded cool, so like, hey, let's just go with it.
Yeah, it's literally like an arc and a spire. Like it's basically like two things that can't actually coexist with each other. So, but there's no real. I think how it came about is I forgot to mention when Spencer was looking for other musicians. One of the old bands he was in, his singer Sean Haysh was living in Vancouver.
Okay.
So he was doing vocals for kind of the beginning, like before it became kind of Archspire, and he actually came up with the name originally. I think he found it in like I can't remember what it was, like a philosophy book or some crazy history thing. I can't remember where he came up with it, but he found it from something and just thought it sounded cool, and so and then when I joined, I joined right as the band was kind of named, like as it was being named.
Yeah.
And 1 week later, I hadn't even jammed with him, but I had jammed with like the other guys. He basically quit. So we had no singer, but we decided to keep the name because, it was available.
Nice.
But yeah, it doesn't mean anything really, but it sounds cool. Like it sounds like a metal band.
Oh yeah.
Which is important, you know. It sounds like it could be something, but it's actually not. And the other cool thing about it, that's actually kind of a benefit, was kind of just, I don't think it was really planned, but if you Google, you know, first it starts with A, so it's the beginning of the alphabet, and if you Google Archspire, nothing else comes up. So that's another thing. There was nothing else named it. I think there was a construction company at one point called Archspire. It was around the same time, and then that website kind of just disappeared. And then once we had like a domain name and stuff like that, or MySpace back when that was
a thing. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody out there remembers that. You know, great way to find out new bands at the time. But yeah, when you would type in our band name, that was the only thing that popped up, which was sweet. And it's simple too, because it was like, it's not this big long sentence. It's not too hard to pronounce. You know, other people say arch or arc. You know, it's one or the other, whatever, you know, whatever you want. And it's just and it sounds kind of metal, so it kind of just worked out in all ways.
Awesome. And since the formation of the band, you guys have released 3 albums. How has the writing process changed over the years, or has it kind of stayed somewhat consistent?
As far as our tastes have, you know, varied here and there, and us getting, I think the biggest thing is us getting used to writing with each other as a band, and us maybe, if I can say it, maturing as songwriters. You know, the basis has always been the same. We all write in a room together, and we all, someone has an idea, we all kind of go over it, and if we like the idea, if everyone agrees on it, we'll push forward and then start working on that idea and trying to make it better. You know, if 1 or 2 dudes don't like, you know, it could be a riff, like, hey, I got this riff idea, and then if no one likes it and we can't really do anything with it to make it, you know, work, then we just can it, start from scratch, and then move on, which it gets frustrating, but at the same time, we know that in the end, we get the product that we both like, or that we all, you know, enjoy and we like. It's not just like one dude sitting there like, all right, here's your parts, this is it. And it works for some bands. Some bands operate like that, or just 2 people write everything, but we have a very hands-on approach, and everybody gets, you know, to say their piece, even with like, not just individual parts, you know, like if I have a guitar solo, like someone might make a suggestion like, hey, maybe you should try this faster or slower, or try to play it longer. Why don't you double that part up? You know, like we're always open to suggestions, you know. It could be even, you know, all these vocal parts too. Everyone kind of can have an input, you know, if he's working on ideas and we're all sitting there listening, you know, anyone's free to be like, hey, this part doesn't sound like it works. Maybe you should try this, you know. So, which is cool, because in the end, everyone's satisfied. It just might take a little longer than some process. People will just write a bunch of stuff and then just kind of keep going, stuff like that. But yeah, the basis, we all write in a rehearsal space all together, and that's never changed. It's just with some technology and stuff like that, we've been, you know, getting better at tracking our stuff and getting our ideas out easier. And now too, like we even do some stuff where we'll track stuff at home individually and send each other ideas online. And then when we go to our practice space, everyone kind of has heard that idea, and then you kind of know if everyone wants to work on it before you get there. Because that's another thing. You have this idea that you might be stoked on, and you've worked on it, and you're like, here, check this out. And everyone's like, this sucks. And you're like, you know, or like, oh, okay, or it's great, cool, let's work on it, or oh, I got an idea for that, I can add this to it, or it's just like, it's not working for me or something. So at least it saves a bit of the anxiety.
Yeah. And speaking of your jam space, are you guys still jamming at that old space that I actually interviewed you guys for like a school project years ago?
Yeah, I do remember that. And yes, we're still on that disgusting jam space, the one on 2nd near Science World. Yeah, we are still there. I mean, obviously now we don't, because of what's going on right now. We haven't been jamming there since like the beginning of
the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, we haven't been jamming since like beginning of March. We pretty much decided to just
play it safe,
call it off. Spencer still goes in there. Yeah, so like we've been like working on stuff at home individually and sending our ideas that way. And but for Spencer, obviously he doesn't have like any setup at home, so he still goes to that, our disgusting, gross, horrible jam space that's covered in mold. But he's the only one that goes there.
Yeah.
So, and then he can work on all of his drum parts and ideas and stuff.
So you guys have headlined shows across the world. Can you share a few memorable moments or fun stories from the road?
I think in the early times, like when we started doing this, it's kind of like that's kind of when everything was that much more exciting because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
And it was just cool to do something we had never done, So a lot of like the early tours, like even like our first Canadian tour we ever did by ourselves was like some of the funnest times just because it was just cool to be out there playing and like, we probably played a bunch of bad shows and whatever, but just the fact that we were going out and trying to do that and trying to do what we think other bands do. But I think one of the coolest kind of moments as a whole was when we went to Europe the first time. That was in 2011, and which was pretty early. Like we started as a band pretty much 2009, and then 2011 we had an opportunity to go to Europe and open for a really awesome tour package. It was Decapitated, Aborted, Flesh God Apocalypse.
Wow. And
then a band from the UK called Cyanide Serenity. They're kind of like a metalcore band, and then us.
That's kind of a weird addition to the bill.
Yeah, I think one of the members worked for the booking agent and really wanted to just do the tour, and they had the means, so they were able to be on the tour package. So
gotcha.
But that was as a whole like one of the coolest moments I think of my life. Just it felt like being like in a real band, sort of. I don't know. It's kind of weird to say. It's kind of hard to explain. We were like, we're playing with these professional bands we listen to all the time. Like growing up listening to bands like Decapitated, Aborted, and it's like, we get to go on tour. We've never done that. We've never done that. We've never toured with like real bands. Especially in Europe. Like this is crazy. And it was pretty nerve wracking. Like the beginning was pretty rough for us. We had like we just didn't know what we were doing. Everything was new. We learned so much. Like proper tour etiquette, how to sell your band, like merch. Merch is such a big thing, especially with metalheads. They love collecting shit. So like, figuring that kind of stuff out, and just even performing, even like how to play to an audience. Like what works and what doesn't. So like for us, it was a lot of note taking. I don't know if there's anything specific, like any pinpointed like crazy wild story or anything, but the whole thing was just awesome, getting to go to a different country every day and play music and see these bands every night. Never got bored. You see the same band every night, you think you might get bored, but at the same time we were so like stoked to just be there, and we felt totally out of place. Like the first show in, there's like no one really speaks English. I mean, even from this is over 10 years ago to like now, or there's like way more people speak English in Europe. And even at the time, even in Germany, like it's pretty heavily English speaking. Ollie would say something like to the crowd and just like nothing, just absolutely dead. And I think because we were the opening band, and B, no one knew who the hell we were, and probably no one could understand what Ollie was saying.
Did a lot of people show up for your set on that tour? Like, being the first band up, it's kind of a crapshoot if people are gonna, come early.
It wasn't actually that bad from what I remember. There were some shows where, like, right away it had, like, a pretty decent turnout. I mean, for us, like, a better turnout than we were used to. And I think it's because in Europe, a lot of people like to go there early. They like to get there at the beginning, and they like to watch every band. They like to see... Because they might be like, maybe the opening band might be cool, or maybe they'll be shit,
That's the way to do it, though. That's the sad thing, especially with local shows here, like on bigger tour packages with local bands. A lot of people don't show up early.
Yeah. People end up going to the shows that they want to go, or sorry, not shows. They want to go just see the band they want to see, and then that's it, and then they go home. And I guess fair enough, but like you might be able to see something new that you haven't, or you might hear a band on YouTube or something and be like, it's okay, but then you see them live and you're like, oh, this is way cooler live, so I think in Europe they have a bit more respect for that, where they'll check everything out, and then make their judgment from there. So it wasn't like we were playing to like no one, kind of thing. There's some decent shows at the beginning for us that at least at the time it felt like it, because I can't really even remember like the crowds per se for some of the shows, so it's kind of hard to compare it to now. Like, but there's definitely some that were cool. Like there was a show we did in Portugal, and it was like a festival.
Okay.
And it was in a mall, so that was pretty cool. Yeah,
like
we went
in
to
a mall or outside of a mall.
So it was literally we had to go into a mall.
Yeah.
And haul all the gear in the mall, go up these elevators, up these escalators into, and then there was a theater section in the mall, and there was 2 theaters, and they cleared all the seats and everything out, and they had, it was 2 stages, and it was basically like one side of the theater was all death metal and brutal stuff, and the other side was all like stoner rock and sludge and doom and stuff. And Enslaved was actually headlining the other room.
Oh, really?
Which was, and I was kind of stoked. I'm like, I got to see some Enslaved, and like they were a cool band back then.
Yeah.
But they weren't playing any of their black metal stuff. It was all like
the more kind of
all their proggy, doomy kind of, and they were all like I was just surprised because I didn't really listen to them too much even growing up, but enough to know like there's some sick black metal albums. Mm-hmm. And then when I go watch their sound check, and it's just like Pink Floyd basically or something. It was just like, what the fuck? Like, where the fuck? There's no blast beats. There's no growling. There's no, it was just kind of weird. So, but that was interesting playing in a mall. That was kind of cool. And that was like, the crowd response for that was great because it was a big festival, and we had a better slot because we were part of that awesome tour package, and we were just kind of the weird odd band out that no one knew about.
It's sad though. I wish we'd have something like that out here. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, there was another show like that, similar, where they had it was kind of like attached to a festival, and I think it was in the Netherlands.
Okay. And
it was pretty much, most of it was all brutal death metal. So bands like Vomitory played, which was awesome because at the time I was like a big Vomitory fan. So like super rad old school death metal. Prostitute Disfigurement played, which is another brutal obscure death metal band. Just stuff like that. So that was kind of an extra bonus, getting to see, like, being on this cool tour package and then seeing bands like that, and then eventually, getting to hang out with all those bands that we toured with. Like everyone was really cool, like for the most part, and it was just I don't know. It was just kind of like mind blown. So I don't know if anything like that will, like all the tours that we have done since have been great, and there's been a lot of awesome ones, and we've met tons of friends, and have had like some of the best times of my life, like just hanging out, with buddies, that are now buddies, from touring so much.
Cool. All right. What was your first exposure to the local scene? Like whether it was hearing a local band or going to your first show?
So there's a venue called the Brickyard in Vancouver from years and years ago, and like tons of bands. Like I saw like Cryptopsy play there for the first time. I saw Exhumed play there. Stuff like that. Like stuff I was like, I can't. And it's a small shitty ass club.
That's
but
cool.
It was just
That's really
it was
cool.
like kind of but like the Cobalt existed still at the time. That was like the other big metal venue
before it went to Funky's.
Yeah, before it went to Funky's, and then now it's just not a thing. But there was a place, and it was closer to the Funky's. It was like kind of that side of the city. I think that's where I saw my first maybe like local metal show, and it might have been Abuse potentially, which was like an old brutal death metal band, like one of the first in Vancouver. I didn't think any bands like that played here. Like I had no idea what the local scene was. And at the time I was playing in a band. It was like a black metal band I was playing in, and we wanted to play shows and stuff, but it's just we didn't know what to do to get there. And local shows, to me, I didn't even really know at the time it was a thing. So I think a friend of mine was like, "Oh, we gotta go check out this band at the Brickyard," and I'm pretty sure it was Abuse. And it was at the time I was like, I'd never really seen. I don't even think I had seen like Cannibal Corpse yet. I'd been, I was listening to them and stuff like that, but I've never seen any real death metal yet. So that might have been one of the first bands I've actually saw live, which was sweet because I was pretty blown away. I was like, wow, this is brutal death metal, and it's in front of me, and it's loud, and this is great. And I mean, who knows if it. I mean, I just remember it being awesome because I'd never seen something like that, and I always wanted to. I'm like, oh, that's death metal live. This is great. And then from there, the band that I was in, like we met people at the show and stuff, and then I think our drummer made some pretty good contacts, and we got this opportunity to play our first show. So that was another kind of introduction to the local scene, and we played at a house party.
Okay.
Which was cool because we had never really played a show before. That was like, I think we did some stuff in high school.
Some talent show stuff?
Sort of, yeah. Like we kind of did like made up our own show, which was cool. The school let us do it, but we're playing we're trying to play like death metal and stuff. We even made like our own posters and stuff for it and like try to treat it like what we thought a real show was. But I mean, so yeah, our first show was like at this house party. And then from then, I think we got like our first gig, and it was at the Brickyard. So we got to play there the first time.
If you could collaborate with any musician, dead or alive, who would it be? I'll give you a few.
Okay, here's a couple. I would really like to collaborate with something that's not metal, but I would love to do a collaboration with a synthwave band called Carpenter Brute.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
If some people know of that group, that would be really cool. It's mainly like this guy Frank who writes, like he's the kind of guy behind all the music that writes most of the stuff and composes it. I think that would be great. It's just something. I mean, I'm a big fan of that style of music, and I think it would just be really cool to do something different. And there's like metal elements to it, like they use electric guitar and stuff. There's guitar solos and stuff like that, and the whole atmosphere of the music is really cool. It's very 80s new wave, synth heavy. It's just really cool stuff and super nostalgic sounding. I think that would be really cool to do a collaboration with that group or a group of that kind of stature. That would be pretty amazing. I think it would be really cool to do. I mean, this would never happen ever in a lifetime, but it would be cool to do something with like a composer.
Okay.
So it'd be really cool to write music with someone like Hans Zimmer would be cool. Or to that's the thing, like I don't know what I would bring to the table, probably not much because but I mean but to just work with someone like that, or to have a concept together and just hatch something out, like something like that would be pretty amazing to get like kind of that different mentality.
Nice.
That wouldn't just be like another metal player, or something like that, which would be kind of like the obvious, like, oh, I'm going to pick like Malmsteen or something. It's like, I mean, there's nothing I'm going to do. The guy's going to play like a billion notes and and not care what I think anyway. So like, it'd be cooler to, write with someone that's doesn't normally play like that style. I think that's what would be a cooler collaboration. So like, yeah, Carpenter Brute would be cool because it's not really metal, but there's the elements there, and that guy knows like his extreme metal. So I think that could be fun. And yeah, like a composer like someone like Hans Zimmer would be like amazing.
All right. So as a touring musician, do you have any advice you'd give to like a band, someone wanting to start a band or to go on their first tour?
Yeah, don't do it. Go to school, get a degree in something that's cooler and that you'll be able to pay your rent and have a good quality of life. And, that's what I would say. I guess, though, to be serious, if you are wanting to do that, finding the people that want to do the same thing as you, I think is the most important part, because that's hard enough. I think that's like the first part. I mean, like, it's one thing if you have like the passion to make a style of music that you want, I mean, that's just goes without saying. I mean, that's why any musician is a musician. They're not doing it to get paid, I mean, or any form of art, you're not doing it to make money. Like there's, that if that happens, it's more of a bonus and that's rad, but people are doing it because they're passionate about, that, art form.
All right. So not everyone knows this, but you're actually a big horror fan. Have you seen anything notable recently that you'd recommend?
Yeah. And yes, I am a huge horror fan. I love that genre so much. And I'm always watching horror movies. Yeah, I think I wrote some notes down so I wouldn't forget because I was hoping you were going to ask that question. Recently, I did watch something on Netflix called Platform. I'm not sure if you checked it out.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, it's I don't know if you've seen the trailer or anything like that. It's a movie from Spain. It's really cool. It's definitely worth checking out. I don't really want to. It's like if I talk about it too much, it might just spoil the whole thing. But it's it's kind of a cool. It's kind of a mix of like the concept is a bit on the sci-fi end of things.
Okay.
Kind of like where there's like it's in the future and there's kind of a hierarchy. There's definitely a hierarchy of people, like more so than everything's confined into like basically a building, and there's different levels of this hierarchy that people are in, and some of these people don't even remember why they're even in there, and it gets pretty intense and pretty messed up. So it's kind of like there's definitely some horror elements to it. It's not merely like too scary kind of horror, but the theme alone is definitely goes in that genre, and it's worth checking out. Another movie that was cool. Actually, one of the last movies I saw in theater was The Invisible Man. I don't know if you checked that one out. That was cool.
I haven't gotten a chance to yet, but I'm going to.
That was really rad. That's more like a thriller kind of horror movie. But that was like the last movie I got to see in theaters before everything went to shit. But it done really well. It's got a really creepy vibe to it. The score alone is awesome, and it adds a lot of cool depth and adds that creepy kind of horror movie element to it. So it's definitely I definitely check out The Invisible Man. That was really well done.
Cool.
Yeah, and what else is there? I wonder if I have any. There's one. If you should check it out if you haven't. It's been around for a few years. It kind of flew under the radar, I think, but it's called The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah, I recommend anybody that likes horror movies to see that. That's for a newer movie on like a decent budget. It's straight up creepy and everything about it. It's like this kind of like a perfect modern movie, I think. Setting's nice and small. The music for it's really creepy and stuff. The acting's really good. The effects in it are the practicals that there's not a whole bunch, but the ones that are there are really well done. And it's just it's just a great movie. Autopsy of Jane Doe is one of my favorite newer movies in the last 5 years or something.
All right, and when did you first get into horror? Do you remember your first horror movie?
Yeah, I think the first movie I saw. Yes, the first horror movie I ever saw was The Lost Boys. It was on a family trip. We were staying in a hotel, and that movie was on, and my parents were like, all right, well, we'll just watch this. And I would think it wasn't too far after the movie came out, so I was probably around like 6, maybe even younger than that. And I thought it was awesome, and I was also scared in some parts too. It was just such a sick movie. That was the first horror movie I ever saw, and I think that kind of just got me hooked. It had a kind of a cool metal vibe to it too. Everyone looked like they were like from Motley Crue too. It was totally that 80s era, the 80s hair metal, and I was just super stoked on that movie and scared of it at the same time. And so from then, I guess anytime my folks would go rent a movie, I would go to the horror movie section, and I would just stare at all the VHS covers. I just look at all of them, having no idea. I would just try to figure out, I'd see the front cover to Evil Dead 2, and just had no concept. I've never really seen anything before. Just super intrigued, or all the Nightmare on Elm Street covers. They just looked so cool, and they looked really creepy and at the same time, and just always wondered what's this movie about? I really want to see it, but obviously I can't. And I'd almost scare myself in the video store.
Yeah. And
then eventually when I got in my early teens, when Halloweens and stuff would come out and I'd go hang out with my friends, our parents would rent us whatever sometimes. Sometimes we just get to go and pick a bunch of movies, and then finally getting to see a lot of those. And then seeing that not a lot of them that I thought were supposed to be this crazy, insane, super scary movie ends up being almost like goofy and campy and stuff like that. There's so many of those. I mean, that 80s filled with them. You got something like The Exorcist, which is like the super serious, groundbreaking, iconic horror movie.
And then you got like Freddy cracking jokes.
Or like something like Sleepaway Camp or something that's even a bit more, kind of goofy-ish.
Yeah. Great
like
ending, though.
Great. I mean, it's all about that ending. Yeah, it's a sick movie. So kind of, went from there. And one of my best friends I grew up with, we just like both were into the same stuff. Like we listened to metal. We were obsessed with like horror movie stuff. So like, pretty much all through my like early teens and up, like I'm like, as soon as I was like 10, 11, I was already watching, whatever horror movies I could see. I remember even seeing like The Thing on TV once at a friend's house, and I was just like so stoked at all the practical effects and just watching it. It was just like, what a cool mix of sci-fi and horror. Mm-hmm. So just, I guess having it around all the time, it just kind of randomly was just there, and it was just kind of always just stoked on it.
That's awesome. I mean, for me, it also started with the video store. Every weekend, my dad would take me to the video store, and I'd wander into the horror section. That was my introduction. And for some reason, this was when I was 9. I picked out Pet Sematary. For some reason, that covers what stood out to me.
Awesome.
But it wasn't until I saw John Carpenter's Halloween that really opened my eyes. And slashers are my favorite when it comes to the genres of horror. So
yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, it's cool when you kind of grasp when you get to that age where it might not quite scare you, but everything about it's really cool, and it's just like, there's so many. I mean, there's so many bad movies and so many amazing movies. So it's kind of cool, like in the beginnings of it, when you see a movie like something like Halloween, it's a good kind of foundation, because it's filmed so well for what it is.
Yeah. And it's considered a low budget film too.
Totally. And it's all how they like it's like all how they play with the light in that movie. Like that's one of those movies where like there's no real blood or anything in that movie, but
they build up that suspense.
They build up the suspense where like people would talk about that movie like, oh, and then there's that part where that chick gets slashed, and there's like no part like that, but there's some, like it happens, but not as graphic as everyone would explain.
Yeah.
It's because it's just like how they filmed it, and it made you kind of fill in the pieces yourself. Like you don't see every single crazy kill scene like you see it kind of like shaded almost in some spots, and then your brain makes up the rest. So then you're like, oh yeah, didn't she get her head cut off or something, or her throat slashed? It's like most likely, but you don't see it, or
yeah, exactly. They leave it up to the audience.
Yeah, totally. And the music as well. I mean, that's such a big part in horror movies, is having that suspenseful, cool music to kind of lift the experience. That's such a big part. So yeah, music and horror movies, man. It's all
right, cool. So I have a listener question here for you. All right, this question comes from Tyler Stover. He asks, why doesn't Archspire talk about their first album much, if at all? So many people don't know it exists.
I think it's maybe because I think anytime we think of that album, because it was the first thing that we did, and the way that it was recorded and how we were all just new at everything, I don't want to say we're like embarrassed or ashamed, but it's almost like we feel a bit of that, like that album's not good and no one liked it and stuff. But I guess it does have a bit of a cult following. Like, it's been out of print forever, and we get asked every time we tour, and that's from people that either have heard it, that just want a copy of it, or they've never heard it. And I think we've just because it was just such an early, it's just like the beginning, and I think there's a part of it where we're like, I don't know, not ashamed, but I don't know, something like that, where we're just kind of like, you don't want, like, no one cares about it. We just kind of like sweep it under the carpet, sort of. But we have talked about doing a re-release, because we're like, hey, you know what, we should. It's been another reason too is the label that we were on originally with it, there were some complications as well. So that, I guess that's another big part of it, is that because we had these complications with the because it wasn't on Season and Mist, it was on another label, and we kind of wanted to break away from that the thing that we were in. Like, it was under a contract, and we weren't trying to break it because we couldn't, but we didn't really want to support it in any way because we had a lot of issues. Without getting into too much details, we had a lot of problems with that first release. So we kind of just were like, well, if we just move forward, do the next one, and then focus on that, and then just do whatever we can to not advertise that, because we don't want, money that we're never going to see to go to this, and we don't want people to order something that they might not get. So I think that's what happened at the beginning. That the main thing was that we just kind of, once we had our second album, we kind of just were like, okay, now we have something else, so now we can try to kind of push that aside to kind of stray away from it so no one pays attention to it, sort of. I think that's kind of just what happened. But now that, we can pretty much do anything we want with it now, it's back in our, our possession. We have been talking about doing a re-release. We're talking about it for a while, but it's just the means of doing it and getting all the logistics set for how we're going to do it and when, the right timing. And like, do we do a re-release and tour on that? I mean, this is months ago when we were talking about this before everything went to shit. Because it's, we could do like a couple small tours based around a re-release, and that's always cool for promo and something in between that and us writing the new album. Or do we wait longer or what? So, and we want to do like vinyl and stuff, because that album never got vinyl, and that's such a big thing that's come back. A lot of people buy vinyl, which is, I mean, I myself do. I love it. It's a cool, format to have music in.
For sure. So
yeah, eventually we will re-release that album. It has been talked about, and we do plan to do it at some point. I mean, I'd love to. It's just the logistics. So I think, we just kind of strayed away from it because we just didn't really want any relation between the label we were on and that album. And just like that it happened to be attached. So we kind of looked at it as like, well, I guess, kind of throw that album away essentially. And then, now that, we can kind of do what we want with it, it's kind of more like, well, maybe we should bring it back. Maybe even try to play a song. I mean, we've been playing Rapid Elemental Dissolve, which is the last song on the album, forever. But maybe try to work another one in. I don't know. It's been so long. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard you say that you're not a big fan of the self-titled track.
Oh, that was in that Metal Injection thing. I just had to say something, and I thought it was funny that I'm just naming our own band on top of the fact that it's the song as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I don't dislike any of our songs. I was thinking, like, what's one of the oldest ones that I'm like, don't really kind of give a fuck about anymore? And I'm like, Archspire. Oh, perfect. It's also our band name.
Nice. Yeah, anyway, if you guys reissue it, I'd love to get a copy on vinyl, because that album's pretty important to me, since it was the first album I ever heard, like, of tech death. Rapid Elemental Dissolve was my first tech death song. Oh, dude, that's really cool. I mean, I think that's, hearing stuff like that's awesome, and that gives us kind of more reason to have to, I think we just need to get it back in pressing it in some format. Because, and I guess the thing, I think we didn't know how much of an impact maybe it had on some people, or how maybe popular it became, like, for our world that we're in, like with the albums that we have, so hearing it more and more on tour, it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe it's not a bad album, I mean, like, you're always gonna be your own worst critic,
worst critic, right? So I think that's kind of how we see it, like, the recording is not bad, and we were all kind of new at everything with the style too, and trying to figure things out. So it was definitely like, not as polished as maybe the stuff now, where we've really figured out our sound, or more so. So I think that's why it's kind of like the beginning. It's almost like a demo to us. So I think that's why we kind of see it as like, no one probably likes it and whatever. But I mean, hearing that people do, then that's sweet. So I think it deserves a re-release.
For sure. All right, man. I got one more question for you.
Sure.
Cool. All right. To finish things off, do you have anything in the works that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet? Any like solo stuff or any Archspire stuff you guys are working on?
Yeah, we are well, I mean, we're trying to as much as we can. We are working. Yeah, at home. We are working on our next album still. Before COVID started, we got pretty like we're up to like our sixth song, which for us is good because it takes us so long to write everything. As I was explaining before, we all write in a jam space together, and it takes time. But it's moving along and getting it, and we've pre-pro'd all those everything that we've had. So getting to listen to some of that stuff in the last little while is kind of cool to be like, oh, okay, well, I think we're on the right track, and I think we're happy with the way it's going so far. And now that we've all had more time, like to write more, I've been trying to work more on riff ideas and longer sections opposed to just a couple riffs in here. Trying to piece, because we're also used to writing together and writing all these big sections together. Mm-hmm. But now that we're not really doing that, I'm taking more time to try to like connect more stuff together, at least just to get some ideas out there and just try to get some sort of flow. And I know Dean's doing that a bit too, like recording ideas and then sending them to each other. So yeah, we still are working on the album. It's just a little bit of I think we work the best when we're all in the room together. And so now that we're not, it's like we're giving each other ideas, and we like where their ideas are going, and everyone's stoked on that. It's more just like, fuck, we just want to get back in there and try these ideas out. We want to see what they're going to be doing. I mean, the closest thing I've asked Spencer to, like, he'll record a couple drum ideas and then send them to me, and I'll try to write stuff to it. Mm-hmm. That's another thing I've been trying to do as well, to like come up with ideas instead of just trying to come up with riff ideas. Like, oh, if I hear a different instrument, try to write to that, opposed to just coming up with something with like a blank canvas. So that's been cool. Doing that a little bit, just having like audio phone recorded drums, and then just trying to write riffs to that kind of stuff. So yeah, we still are working away at it. It's just obviously taking a little longer. But yeah. So that's in the works. And then myself, I'm just, because I have so much time, I've just been messing around with like other style music stuff, like just like orchestration stuff. I've been trying to get into a little bit of that just for fun, just taking like guitar ideas and then trying to transpose them in like different instruments, like seeing what a guitar part would sound like with a piano and violin, stuff like that, and shit like that. Just to try something different, try to get the brain working, try to work in a different format instead of just using the guitar all the time, which is, I mean, it's the instrument I do use all the time, but it's kind of cool to break away and try something different. Maybe you're like, oh, maybe I'll get a cool chord progression out of fucking around with a bunch of other instruments I never really use on like a MIDI keyboard, So that's something I've been kind of doing just for fun on my own while we have nothing else to do.
Yeah, fair enough. And where can people find you online?
We have, I mean, for the band, we got our Facebook account. We have Instagram, Twitter. It's all just under Archspire. We all have our own individual accounts, like Instagrams and stuff like that. I have an Instagram account. I have Facebook. I don't use it too much, more just to chat with friends and stuff. And Instagram I use a lot more just for doing like, guitar riff stuff and promo stuff and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of like where you'll find any Archspire info. Will be like Instagram or Facebook and Twitter a little bit, but mainly Facebook and Instagram are the two main ones.
All right, awesome. I appreciate you talking to me today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It was fun.